All I know is I will stay single for life before I enter another toxic AS relationship. Facts. These words, posted on Facebook by 22-year-old David Edens Jr., would become his final message to the world. Just hours after sharing this prophetic statement, David lay dead on the floor of a Motel 6 room in Greenville, South Carolina, shot by the very woman he had tried to distance himself from. November 19, 2019, began as an ordinary day. David, known to friends as Sosapak Sour online, updated his social media like any other day. His post about avoiding toxic relationships seemed like casual venting, the kind we all do sometimes. No one, least of all David, could have known it would foreshadow his death. What drives someone to hunt down their child's father at a motel? What pushes a person to smash through windows, searching room by room until they find their target? And what happens in that final moment when a heated argument escalates to murder? That night at the Wade Hampton Boulevard Motel 6, other guests heard the commotion. They witnessed a woman frantically breaking windows, determined to find someone. One witness, Samantha Rustler, watched in horror as the confrontation unfolded. They kept busting out windows until they found who they were looking for, she later told reporters. Once they found him, they started yelling at him to come outside the room. Just come outside the room. Once he came out, they shot him. The shooter was 25-year-old Kodesha Bryson, David's ex-girlfriend and the mother of his 1-year-old daughter. This isn't just another crime story. This is about a young father whose life ended too soon. A man who left behind 2 children who will grow up without their dad. A family shattered by violence that they never saw coming. Have you ever noticed warning signs in a relationship, yours or someone close to you, but didn't know how to address them? The tragedy of David Edens Jr. reminds us how quickly domestic tensions can turn deadly. I'm sharing David's story because stories like his often go untold. When we hear about domestic violence, we typically imagine a different scenario, but the reality is that men can be victims too. By watching this video to the end, commenting with your thoughts, and sharing it with others, you're helping bring awareness to all victims of relationship violence. If this story moves you, if you believe David deserves justice and recognition, then subscribe to join our community dedicated to bringing these important stories to light. Together we can ensure that David Edens Jr. is remembered not just for how he died, but for the loving father and son he was in life. Now, let's go back to the beginning and understand who David was before that fateful night at Motel 6. Born on April 22, 1997, in Greenville, South Carolina, David Marquise Duke Edens Jr. grew up surrounded by a close-knit family who adored him. The son of David Edens Sr. and Sharita Gorey, he was raised with strong family values that would shape his character throughout his short life. Those who knew David described him as someone who radiated warmth and loyalty. Despite his youth, he embraced responsibility with open arms, particularly when it came to his 2 children, Kalanmi and Amira Edens. His dedication to fatherhood stood out to everyone who knew him. He wasn't just present in his children's lives, he was actively involved, working hard to provide stability and nurturing their futures. He was a great dad, family members would repeatedly say, even after his death. This sentiment was echoed by everyone from close relatives to acquaintances. Even Kodesha Bryson, the woman who would ultimately take his life, acknowledged this truth during her tearful court appearance. On social media, David presented himself differently than the family man his loved ones knew. Under the name Sosapak Sour, his Facebook profile showcased a young man enjoying life, posing with money, hanging with friends, and projecting confidence. These posts revealed another dimension of David, a young man navigating the complex world of adulthood while trying to establish his identity. His cousin, Lucchese Baldwin, spoke of David with deep affection, emphasizing how the family had welcomed Kodesha as one of their own because of her connection to David. "We accepted her as family," Baldwin told reporters. "You had a child by him. We accepted you as family. We didn't treat you any different." David's father, David Edens Sr., embodied the family's strength during the tragedy. Even in the depths of grief, his focus remained on the children left behind. "It's all about the kids right now," he stated firmly. "He is gone. She is pretty much gone now. It is what it is. Making sure those kids are taken care of is all I'm concerned about." This focus on family wasn't surprising to anyone who knew the Edens. David Jr. had been raised in this tradition, putting family first, working through difficulties, and maintaining bonds through challenges. He carried these values into his own approach to fatherhood. What dreams did David hold for his future? What plans had he made for his children's lives? These questions now remain painfully unanswered. At just 22 years old, David stood at the beginning of adulthood with decades of potential ahead. He had already established himself as a loving father, son, and brother. Family members noted his strong connections not just with his children and parents, but with siblings, grandparents, and extended relatives as well. Have you ever wondered how a single moment can permanently alter a family's trajectory? For the Edens family, November 19, 2019 became that pivotal moment, the day when all future family gatherings would have an empty chair, when holidays would carry a permanent shadow, when two children would grow up knowing their father only through stories and photographs. As we examine David's life, we see a young man who, despite any mistakes or challenges, prioritized his role as a father and maintained strong family connections. Understanding who David was makes the circumstances of his death all the more tragic and raises important questions about the relationship that would ultimately end his life. The relationship between David Edens Jr. and Kodesha Bryson followed a path that many young couples experience: initial attraction, the joy of welcoming a child, followed by mounting tensions and eventual separation. But unlike most failed relationships, theirs would end with fatal consequences. At 25, Kodesha was 3 years older than David. The details of their first meeting remain private, known only to them and perhaps close friends. What is clear is that their connection was strong enough to result in the birth of their daughter, who was just 1 year old when tragedy struck. Family members later revealed that while the couple shared a child, they were no longer together at the time of David's death. The separation hadn't been clean or simple. Like many relationships involving co-parenting, theirs continued with regular contact, disagreements, and the complex emotions that come with raising a child together while living apart. Reports suggest that Bryson had displayed aggressive tendencies throughout their relationship. These behaviors didn't disappear after the couple separated. Instead, they intensified. The pattern of conflict between them became increasingly concerning to those who witnessed it, though few could have predicted the violent conclusion that awaited. David's family had welcomed Kodesha into their lives because of her connection to David and their grandchild. "We accepted her as family," his cousin Lucchese Baldwin later told reporters, the pain of betrayal evident in her words. This acceptance makes Kodesha's actions all the more incomprehensible to the Edens family. What causes a relationship to deteriorate to such a dangerous point? Were there moments when intervention might have changed the outcome? These questions haunt not only the families involved, but also communities grappling with domestic violence. In the hours before his death, David's Facebook post about toxic relationships revealed his state of mind. "All I know is I will stay single for life before I enter another toxic-ass relationship. Facts." This statement suggests he had reached a breaking point, a decision to prioritize peace over continuing the cycle of conflict with Kodesha or perhaps someone else he was seeing. Did Kodesha see this post? Did it trigger her actions that night? While we can't know for certain what was in her mind, the timing suggests a possible connection between David's public declaration and her subsequent rage. The relationship had clearly reached a critical juncture. David was staying at a motel rather than at home, another indication that the situation between them had become untenable. This temporary housing arrangement is often a sign of relationship transition or turmoil. Have you ever witnessed a relationship where tension seemed to build like pressure in a sealed container? Where did you think it would lead? For David and Kodesha, that pressure found its release in the most devastating way possible. Their story raises important questions about how we support young parents through relationship difficulties. How do we help them navigate the emotional complexities of co-parenting after separation? When should friends, family, or authorities step in when aggression becomes part of the dynamic? As their 1-year-old daughter grows up, she will eventually learn the tragic story of her parents. how a relationship that created her life ultimately ended her father's. This innocent child represents both the love that once existed between David and Kodesha and the terrible price paid when that relationship turned toxic. November 19, 2019 began as an ordinary Tuesday in Greenville, South Carolina. For David Edens Jr., it was a day like many others, until it became his last. That afternoon, David was active on social media. At some point, he composed what would become his final Facebook post. "All I know is I will stay single for life before I enter another toxic-ass relationship. Facts." The timing of this statement, just hours before his death, creates a haunting prelude to the violence that would follow. Was he reflecting on his relationship with Kodesha? Or perhaps another romantic entanglement? Whatever prompted this declaration, David clearly had relationships on his mind. Meanwhile, Kodesha Bryson's day was taking a different turn. What triggered her actions remains unclear. Whether she saw David's post, received information about him, or was acting on existing anger. What we do know is that as evening approached, her emotions escalated to a dangerous level. David had taken a room at the Motel 6 on Wade Hampton Boulevard. This temporary accommodation suggests he was in transition, perhaps needing space from relationship conflicts or simply between more permanent housing arrangements. The motel, with its transient population and thin walls, would soon become the stage for tragedy. As darkness fell over Greenville, Kodesha's anger propelled her toward the motel. She arrived visibly agitated, according to witnesses. Her mission was clear: find David. Her method was destructive. What goes through someone's mind as they search for a person with such determination? What emotions drive someone to break windows, disturb strangers, and create chaos in a public place? For Kodesha, the need to confront David overwhelmed all rational thought and social boundaries. The motel guests watched in alarm as a woman moved from room to room, breaking windows in her search. One of those witnesses, Samantha Rustler, would later provide a chilling account of what she observed. The scene she described was one of escalating chaos, glass shattering, voices rising, and tension building toward an inevitable confrontation. Did anyone try to intervene? Did anyone call the police before the situation turned deadly? These questions remain part of the tragedy's aftermath, the moments when prevention might still have been possible. By approximately 10:30 p.m., Kodesha had located David's room. The confrontation that followed happened quickly. Words were exchanged, emotions flared, and then a gunshot. In that instant, multiple lives changed forever. David Edens Jr., just 22 years old, fell to the floor with a fatal wound. His children lost their father, his parents lost their son, and Kodesha Bryson transformed from an angry ex-girlfriend to a murderer. Have you ever wondered how quickly a moment of anger can alter the course of multiple lives? How a single decision made in rage can create ripples of pain that extend for generations? This case forces us to confront these uncomfortable questions. After the shooting, Kodesha fled the scene. Perhaps the reality of what she had done was beginning to penetrate the fog of anger. Later that night, she would turn herself in to law enforcement, an action that suggests she recognized the gravity of her actions, even if too late. As we reflect on this day that ended so tragically, I want to ask you, what do you think drives someone to this level of violence in a relationship? Have you witnessed warning signs in relationships around you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective might help someone recognize danger before it's too late. The events at Motel 6 that night would soon draw police, media attention, and public scrutiny. But in that moment, as David's life ended on a motel room floor, the full impact of this tragedy was just beginning to unfold. At approximately 10:35 p.m. on November 19, 2019, police responded to a call at the Motel 6 on Wade Hampton Boulevard. The initial report mentioned a burglary, a common enough occurrence that wouldn't normally attract significant attention. What officers discovered, however, was far more serious. Inside one of the motel rooms lay David Edens Jr., motionless on the floor with a gunshot wound. Medical personnel confirmed what was already apparent. The 22-year-old father of two was dead. The room told part of the story: broken glass from the smashed windows scattered across the floor, signs of a struggle, and the chaotic aftermath of violence. Outside, other motel guests had witnessed crucial parts of the incident. Samantha Rustler, staying at the Motel 6 that night, provided police with a detailed account of what she had seen. "They kept busting out windows until they found who they were looking for," Rustler told investigators. "Once they found him, they started yelling at him to come outside the room. Just come outside the room. Once he came out, they shot him." Her testimony painted a picture of determination and rage, Kodesha methodically searching for David, destroying property in the process, and finally confronting him with deadly consequences. Rustler also mentioned that she had briefly interacted with David before the incident and found him friendly, making the violence that followed even more shocking to her. "I feel bad for them and don't feel safe anymore," she added, expressing the ripple effect of fear that violent crimes create in communities. Police secured the area and began collecting evidence. They photographed the scene, documented the property damage, and gathered witness statements from other motel guests. The investigation was straightforward in many ways. Multiple witnesses had seen Kodesha at the scene, and she had made no significant effort to hide her actions before or during the confrontation. What wasn't immediately clear was the weapon's location. Had Kodesha disposed of it while fleeing? Had she kept it with her? This question would be answered when she turned herself in to law enforcement later that night. As news of the shooting spread, David's family received the call that every parent, sibling, and loved one dreads. Their son, brother, and father was gone, killed in a motel room by the mother of his child. The shock and grief that followed are impossible to fully capture in words. Meanwhile, police began piecing together the relationship history between David and Kodesha. They examined social media posts, interviewed family members, and constructed a timeline of events leading to the shooting. David's final Facebook post about toxic relationships took on new significance in light of what followed. The crime scene at Motel 6 would eventually be cleared. The broken glass would be swept away, the room cleaned and rented to new guests, unaware of its history. But the evidence collected there would form the foundation of the case against Kodesha Bryson. For investigators, the physical evidence told one story, but understanding the human elements required deeper examination. What had pushed this relationship to such a violent breaking point? Were there missed opportunities for intervention? Could this death have been prevented? When you hear about crimes like this in your community, do you ever wonder about the warning signs that might have been visible beforehand? Do you think about how different choices might have led to different outcomes? These questions aren't just academic. They're at the heart of preventing similar tragedies. As police completed their work at the motel, the case moved into its next phase. Kodesha Bryson would face the legal system, while David's family would begin the painful process of grieving and seeking justice for the young man whose life ended far too soon. Following her surrender to authorities, Kodesha Bryson faced the severe legal consequences of her actions. Prosecutors charged her with murder, possession of a weapon during a violent crime, and malicious damage. These charges reflected both the fatal shooting and her destructive search through the motel property. The day after David's death, Bryson appeared for her bond hearing. The courtroom was filled with tension as members of David's family came face to face with the woman accused of killing their loved one. Emotions ran high as Bryson, now confronting the reality of her situation, addressed the court and the Edens family. Through tears, she offered an explanation that many found difficult to accept. "I love y'all. I'm sorry, the gun went off. I would never try to hurt him. He's a great dad." Her claim that the shooting was accidental contradicted witness accounts of her determined search for David and the confrontation that followed. It also raised questions about why she had brought a gun to the motel in the first place if her intentions weren't violent. David's cousin, Lucchese Baldwin, rejected Bryson's tearful apology outright. "I didn't receive it at all," Baldwin told reporters after the hearing. "She apologized, but you had time to think. You went looking for him." This sentiment that Bryson's actions showed premeditation rather than a momentary lapse was shared by many of David's supporters. The judge denied bond, citing the serious nature of the charges and potential flight risk. Bryson was returned to the Greenville County Detention Center, where she would remain as the case progressed through the legal system. For prosecutors, the case appeared straightforward. Multiple witnesses had seen Bryson searching for David, breaking windows in the process. Her arrival at the motel with a weapon suggested she had anticipated or even planned for a violent confrontation. The evidence pointed toward deliberate action rather than an accident. Bryson's defense team faced significant challenges. They would need to explain her aggressive search through the motel, the presence of the weapon, and why, if the shooting was truly accidental, she fled the scene afterward. Their strategy would likely focus on the emotional aspects of the case, portraying Bryson as overwhelmed by feelings rather than acting with malicious intent. As the legal process continued, both families grappled with the reality that no court outcome could truly repair what had been broken. David's children would grow up without their father. Bryson's child would likely grow up with her mother in prison. The ripple effects of that single violent moment would continue for decades. Have you ever considered how the justice system balances punishment with rehabilitation in cases involving family violence? Is there a way to achieve justice for victims while also addressing the underlying issues that lead to such violence? These questions have no easy answers, but they're essential to consider as we examine cases like David's. Throughout the legal proceedings, David's father maintained remarkable composure. David Edens Sr. focused not on vengeance, but on the practical concerns facing his grandchildren. "Now my son is gone," he said, "but the real concern is for their child. No one wins in this situation." This perspective, looking beyond punishment to the welfare of the innocent children caught in the tragedy, offers a powerful example of putting family first even in the darkest circumstances. It also highlights the often overlooked victims of violent crime, the children left to grow up in the shadow of tragedy. As Bryson's case moved through the court system, the community of Greenville watched and waited. Another reminder that violence affects not just the immediate families involved, but entire communities. The ripple effects of David Edens Jr.'s murder extended far beyond the motel room where his life ended. For his family, the loss created a void that could never be filled, a permanent absence at holidays, birthdays, and everyday moments. David's father, David Edens Sr., embodied the family's resilience in the face of overwhelming grief. "Every moment is tough," he admitted to reporters. "It was tough for us even to come down here, but we as family, we stick together and we pull through it because we are a strong family." His words revealed both the pain of their loss and the determination to move forward together. For the Edens family, the focus quickly shifted to the innocent victims of this tragedy. David's two children, Kaloni and Amiri. At such young ages, they would have few, if any, personal memories of their father. Their understanding of who he was would come primarily through stories, photographs, and the love of their extended family. "It's all about the kids right now," David Sr. emphasized repeatedly. This sentiment reflected not just immediate concern, but a long-term commitment to ensuring these children would be raised with love and stability, despite the traumatic circumstances that marked their early lives. The one-year-old daughter shared by David and Kodesha faced a particularly complex future. She would grow up knowing that her mother had taken her father's life, a devastating reality that would require careful, compassionate explanation as she matured. How do you tell a child such a painful truth? When is the right time? These questions would challenge her caregivers for years to come. Extended family members like Louise Baldwin struggled to comprehend Kodesha's actions, especially given how they had welcomed her into their family circle. "We accepted her as family," Baldwin said, the confusion and betrayal evident in her voice. This sentiment of having embraced someone who then caused such harm added another layer of pain to their grief. In the wider Greenville community, David's murder sparked conversations about domestic violence, conflict resolution, and the sometimes lethal consequences of relationship breakdowns. Local organizations working to prevent domestic violence pointed to cases like David's as evidence that relationship violence affects all genders and takes many forms. The guests at Motel 6 who witnessed the events of November 19th carried their own trauma from that night. Samantha Russler expressed how the violence had shattered her sense of security. "I feel bad for them and don't feel safe anymore." Her experience highlights how violent crimes create fear that extends beyond those directly involved. Media coverage of the case brought attention to the issue of relationship violence in South Carolina, a state that has consistently ranked among the worst in the nation for domestic violence rates. David's story became part of a larger narrative about the need for better prevention, intervention, and support services. Have you noticed how a single act of violence creates waves of trauma that touch countless lives? From immediate family to distant acquaintances, from first responders to community members who simply read about the crime. Everyone is affected in some way. This collective impact raises important questions about our responsibility to recognize and address warning signs before violence occurs. For David's children, the full impact of their father's death would unfold gradually over years and decades, milestone moments without him present, questions about who he was, and the challenge of understanding a loss that occurred before they could form lasting memories. Their journey would be shaped by how their family helped them process this early trauma and build their own identities in its shadow. As the Edens family navigated their grief, they demonstrated remarkable grace, focusing on the future of the children rather than being consumed by anger toward Kodesha. This approach offered a powerful example of how families can move forward after unimaginable loss, prioritizing healing over hatred. The tragedy of David Edens Jr. offers more than just a cautionary tale. It provides crucial insights into how similar situations might be prevented. His story highlights the importance of identifying relationship danger signs before they escalate to violence. In examining what happened between David and Kodesha, several critical patterns emerge. Their relationship had been marked by ongoing conflicts and separations, indicators of underlying issues that weren't being effectively addressed. David's final Facebook post about avoiding toxic relationships suggests he recognized the unhealthy dynamics, but may not have had the resources or support to fully extricate himself from the situation. For those in troubled relationships, David's story underscores the importance of creating safety plans when separating from volatile partners. Staying at a public location like a motel might seem like a temporary solution, but without additional precautions, it can create vulnerability. Professional domestic violence advocates recommend more comprehensive safety planning that includes confidential locations, legal protections, and support networks. The presence of a firearm dramatically increased the lethality of this situation. Research consistently shows that access to firearms significantly raises the risk of fatal outcomes in domestic disputes. This case demonstrates why restricting access to weapons is often a critical component of domestic violence prevention. What makes David's case particularly notable is that it challenges common assumptions about relationship violence. While statistics show women are more frequently victims, men like David can also face lethal violence from partners. This reality highlights the need for support services that address all victims, regardless of gender. For friends and family who notice concerning behaviors in relationships, David's story emphasizes the importance of speaking up. Were there moments when intervention might have changed this outcome? Did people notice Kodesha's aggressive tendencies but hesitate to address them? These questions aren't about assigning blame, but about learning how communities can better protect vulnerable individuals. Professional counselors who work with troubled couples point to several approaches that can help de-escalate conflicts before they turn violent. Mediation services that provide neutral third-party guidance, anger management programs that teach emotional regulation, co-parenting classes that focus on healthy communication, individual therapy to address underlying issues. For communities seeking to prevent similar tragedies, a multifaceted approach is essential. This includes education about healthy relationships beginning in schools, accessible mental health services, and robust legal protections for those facing threats or harassment. Have you ever witnessed concerning behavior in a relationship but felt unsure about whether or how to intervene? Many people struggle with this question, balancing respect for others' privacy against genuine concern for their safety. What would you do differently after hearing David's story? The children left behind after relationship violence face particular challenges. They need specialized support to process their trauma and develop healthy relationship models despite their early experiences. For David's children, the path forward will require compassionate caregivers who can help them understand their father's death in age-appropriate ways as they grow. Perhaps the most powerful lesson from David's story is that relationship violence is preventable, not inevitable. Each warning sign represents an opportunity for intervention. Each conflict presents a choice about how to respond. By recognizing these moments and making different choices, future tragedies might be avoided. If you're currently in a relationship that feels unsafe or know someone who is, please remember that help is available. National hotlines provide confidential support, local shelters offer emergency housing, and legal advocates can help navigate protective orders. No one should face relationship violence alone. By sharing stories like David's, we contribute to greater awareness and potentially help others recognize dangerous situations before they escalate. Your comments, shares, and engagement with this video extend its reach, potentially connecting this important message with someone who needs to hear it today. As we reflect on the life and death of David Edens Jr., we're left with profound questions about love, violence, and the fragility of human life. A young father with dreams for his children's future was taken in a moment of rage, a moment that transformed multiple lives forever. David's story isn't just about how he died, but about who he was, a devoted father to Coloni and Amere, a beloved son to David Sr. and Sharita, a valued member of a strong family that, in his father's words, sticks together even through unimaginable pain. His legacy lives on not only in his children, but in the conversations his story has sparked about relationship violence and its prevention. The tragedy at Motel 6 on November 19, 2019, reminds us that behind every headline about violence lies real people with hopes, dreams, and families who love them. David was more than a statistic. He was a young man trying to navigate the complexities of relationships, co-parenting, and building a future. What would David's life have looked like had he lived? What milestones would he have celebrated with his children? These questions have no answers, but they remind us of the true cost of violence, the stolen potential, the memories never made, the love never given. If David's story has moved you, if it's made you think differently about relationship conflicts or warning signs of violence, please take a moment to share this video. Your single click could help this message reach someone who desperately needs to hear it today, someone who might be standing at a crossroads similar to where David and Kodesha once stood. I also invite you to join our community by subscribing. Together, we're bringing attention to stories that matter, stories that might otherwise be forgotten. Each subscription helps amplify voices that have been silenced and honors victims like David by ensuring their stories are told. What relationship warning signs have you noticed in your own life or the lives of those close to you? How did you respond? Your experiences and insights shared in the comments below could provide valuable perspective for others facing similar situations. David Edens Jr. should be alive today, watching his children grow, building his future, and experiencing all that life has to offer. While we cannot change what happened that night at Motel 6, we can honor his memory by learning from his story and working to prevent similar tragedies. Thank you for bearing witness to David's story. May we all find wisdom in its telling.